Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, Vintage Fishing Reel Rescue. Today I have this Zebco Quantum Blue Runner 50. Picked this one up at the thrift store. It's actually still got the price tag on. I have to get rid of that, get that off there. Today we're going to clean this one up. This one's got quite a bit of wear on the outer case. Paint scraped off, that type of thing. It's well used. It cosmetic issues. It's not going to hurt it. Does have something going on with it where it only wants to go so far and stops either direction. I'm thinking it's something with the anti-reverse. I'm not real sure. We'll dig into it and find out. We'll get this thing cleaned up, see if we can't get it back out on the water. And the bail is quite stiff too. Drag seems to work. And our reverse lever does absolutely nothing at this point. Okay, well, let's start by taking off the external components. We'll take the handle off and then we'll take the spool off. This handle comes off by spinning this nut off here, this screw. Take that out of there. This reel can be switched from a right or a left hand to retrieve, which makes it nice for whichever way you'd like to use it. Handle just pulls out, or it's supposed to, but it seems to be stuck. Oh, that's quite stiff too. So we'll have to get that cleaned up. I like to put the screw right back in place, that way it don't get lost. And I can set this all on a table and save room in my parts bin. Take the spool off. We'll spin this nut here. A little bit farther. It's quite a long-winded one. There we are. Okay, let's slip the spool off. There is a little bit of dirt and debris down in there. We'll get that all cleaned out here in a little bit. Now let's take the side cover off here. Start by removing these 3 screws here. That'll remove this side cover. I want to try to use a good quality, good shaped screwdriver. You don't want to strip out the slots in these screws. Make it a bugger to get them out. So far these screws are all the same length. I usually like to try to compare them. Make sure if there's a longer or shorter one, I know where it goes when I go to reassemble. This makes it a lot easier. And that screw edge is loosened up. It's just not coming out of the case. There we are. Yep, those screws are all the same length. Now we remove this side cover here. Oh, this side cover is actually stuck under the rotor. So what we'll have to do is we'll remove the rotor first. That tells me this pin should come out. Oh, let's take this is a locking screw for this nut, so that nut does not come loose while you're using it. So we'll remove that screw and then we can loosen that nut up and get the rotor out. That pin would have to come out if that's trapped under there. So that tells me that pin would have to come out. Grab me a pair of pliers here. No, it's not wanting to come out. Interesting. Because you can't get that cover off with the rotor on there. Well, let's loosen that nut up, and that'll give us the room to get it out anyway. And then we can see how this comes the rest of the way apart. Take the nut off. Now the rotor will lift up, and then we can get our side cover off. There we are. Okay, to finish pulling the rotor off, we'll need to pull this screw here. This is the screw that holds that axle shaft in on the eccentric gear. Set that up in our parts bin. Now that axle shaft will pull straight out. I'm bringing the nut along with it. Set that in my parts bin. Now we have the rotor off. This does have a washer here you want to watch. You don't want to lose as you set the rotor off to the side. There's also a washer down here. This is your anti-reverse gear right here. Let's see now if this spins now. It is spinning free now. So there was something still not seeing what was causing that to lock up. The anti-reverse dog is sticking pretty good though. So I have to get that working well. We'll work on that in just a minute. Let's pull this main gear out. There's a bearing right here. And it's surprising that this is not a sealed bearing. I can see down into there. There's a little bit of maybe, I guess. See it. Seeing a little bit of corrosion right here on that main gear also. Some old grease on there. We'll get that all cleaned up and out of there. And pull this. This drives the axle shaft, raising it up and down so that the spool loads evenly. Is it correct? Nope. And this gear here has that pin on it that rides in that groove, makes this go back and forth. If this is in place, you can see how the action works. Get that back in there. You just turn that gear in that. Well, if the axle shaft was in there, it'd be easier to tell, but there. And as you turn that, it goes up and down to raise and lower the spool. Okay, let's go take the axle shaft back out. Take this piece back off. It looks like there's a little screw right in the center of that holding that on. I might be wrong. Let's see if it just lifts off. No, it does not. I believe there is a little tiny screw right in the center of that. Let's see if we can clean that out down in there. More penetrating oil help get that grease broke up and out of there. Okay, I'm not 100% sure how this guy comes off of there. There's a sight window there for some reason. I just don't know what that is for. Don't really know. And I don't see how that comes up off there. I don't want to break anything, so I'm not going to get too excited about getting that off there. It does move nice and free. With that in place, I won't be able to get that bearing out of there either, so I'm going to lubricate that in place. This case is actually fairly clean in here. Get this grease out of the back area here and off of this. Okay. pull this screw here, and that arm will come off, and then I can get it cleaned up and lubricated and working freely. You gotta be careful, there is a spring on there. You want to pay attention to how that is in there, how it's placed, so you can get it back in so that this will be work correctly. The spring is right here, goes against this arm, and then hooks on here also. So let's raise this up over that so that'll take the pressure off it, and we can lift this arm up off of here. Careful not to lose that spring. Sometimes there's washers and stuff on there you want to watch for too. I don't happen to see any on this one. This looks like that gear will come off that shaft, this anti-reverse gear. Also want to know what direction it's going. It looks like this could be put on in either way. So I want to note that the teeth wrap around this in this direction here. The flat side's on the left, the curved side on the right. Let's see if that does actually come up. Yes, it does. So we'll set that. That actually feels plastic. Looks. And then I will remove these two screws here, and I can get that pinion gear out. And get that bearing out so we can service that bearing. This should pull right out, which it does. And that's pretty much the case is torn apart here. There is a spring right here, flat metal spring for the detent on this. There's a screw there. You can pull this shaft out to get that. I don't see a reason to pull that. There's not really anything going on with it. It's not froze up. It's working free. I'll put a little lubrication into there. But I'm going to leave that in place along with that because I'm not 100% sure how that comes off. And I don't want to break anything. This reel works decent. Or well, it should work decent when we're done. So I'm going to put a little oil down in that bearing, soak it good, lubricate this. There we are. And we'll get a little bit down in on either side of that anti-reverse shaft there. A little bit right here in this groove. That's where that spring rides to help keep it from wearing. That's working good and free. My gear down here is working good and free. Let that set so that oil can seep down into that bearing. We'll clean these other pieces up, get this ready to reassemble. Always want to inspect these gears, look everything over real good while you're cleaning it. Look for broken teeth, worn teeth, that kind of thing. Worn teeth will make a little bit of noise. It can also cause a binding. Broken teeth will definitely cause issues. Like I said, there's a little corrosion here. I want to try to get that cleaned up. There's a little green emery. Here's scratch pad. And that bearing, we should be able to get that bearing off. I'm not going to work at it too hard. So it may be froze on there. A lot of times aluminum and steel will freeze together, and I don't want to destroy anything. It's pretty stuck, so let's leave that. Do the same thing as the rear bearing. Get some oil right down on there so it can soak into that bearing good. That part's cleaned up. Let that sit so that oil can get down into there. This bearing's nice and free on here. That's going to get lubricated the same way. This one I can actually see the little roller balls down in there, so I'm going to lubricate that side because it shows me there's no seal on that side. That was the internal part. Get this cleaned up. Use paper towel. I use Q-tips and such to get into the tight areas. They work rather well. We'll clean this axle shaft up. I'm pretty sure that pin should come out because you have to pull that nut to get the rotor up so you can get the cover from behind it. I'm thinking that may be frozen in place, but I'm not going to worry about it. I can get it back together without taking that apart, and there's no reel other reason to do it. So also noticing this anti-reverse gear has a spring on it. We want to be watched for. We don't want to lose that. That goes toward the bottom. There's a notch right here. I don't know if you can see this notch that is going to go against and go down into that groove right there. So we got to pay attention for that when we reassemble it. Okay, we've pretty much got all the pieces cleaned up here. So let's go ahead and start lubricating and get this thing back together. Okay. Start by putting the bearing back on the pinion shaft. This side without the seal goes toward the inside of the reel. Oop, forgot to clean out this outside a little bit, get this dirt out of here. See, the Q-tips work real well for getting down into these tight areas like this. There we are. We'll put our pinion shaft back in. We have these two little screws. Oops, I left them right here on the bench. Don't like to do that because they knock them around. Put these two little screws back in to hold that bearing and shaft into place. Oops. Can be a little tricky to get these screws down into place when you got bigger fingers. Use a little bit of grease on the screwdriver, works well. That'll fit that. Just a touch of grease on there, it'll stick right to the screwdriver, or a magnetic screwdriver if they're not stainless steel screws. There we are, we got that one back in. Okay, we have our anti-reverse dog here. We want to make sure to lubricate that good. The spring's in place on it. Let me pop that off. I want to wipe that off a little bit. Springs are very delicate. You want to be careful not to stretch them out. Oops, got to get it under that so it works properly. Oops. Okay. And if you remember, this spring goes behind this little post here. Get the screw back in here. Snug it up. Wipe off any excess grease. Also notice a little bit of debris on that in that hole where the axle shaft rides, so I might clean that out. There we go. Okay, we'll put our anti-reverse gear back into place. So remember to watch for that spring where it goes up here. I showed on that little post. I want to put this in the on-lock position so that there is two flat spots here too. I didn't mention that that gear locks that gear into that shaft. You've got to line them up. There, now our anti-reverse dog is working. We want to put a little bit of lube on that. Don't need a lot. Let that work into there. Now it's working as it should. Remember earlier it was locking up in both directions. Still haven't found the cause of that, but I think it has to do with that anti-reverse dog and gear there. Alright, now we'll put our main gear. We're going to lubricate that. I like to use this Super Lube multi-purpose synthetic grease. It is rated for saltwater use. It's good for -45 up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Works real well. Every year I take my reels apart, and this stuff is a little bit dirtier, but it's still very pliable, movable. It's not gelled up, froze up, anything. I want to make sure to get some grease on the gear that runs this eccentric gear. I'm also going to coat the face of this a little bit, not real heavy, because of that other piece that rides on it comes in contact with it, so we want to make sure it's got lubrication. This will slide into the lower bearing. The bearing's still in the case. There we go. It's back in place. Turn the pinion shaft, it moves it. We'll lubricate the ends of this here, ride on matching grooves on the case. So we want to make sure to get just a touch of grease on that. A little bit in the groove for that pin to ride. And there that is. So want to turn this, get that pin toward the back. And then you got to get that pin into this S-shaped groove here. There we are. That's in place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our rotor back on. Let's wipe the grease out of here. Lubricate the bail on this. It seemed to be a little bit sticky, nothing real bad, so we don't think it's going to be a big deal. And it's already freed up. Working as it should. Bail trigger here, we'll give it, maybe that is what was hanging up actually. There we are, it actually was. So now we're going to give that a little bit of lube. Make sure it's working properly. There we go. I'm glad I seen that. I didn't quite catch that earlier. But that is probably the piece. Oh, there's a washer. We don't want to lose that. We'll slide that down onto our shaft. Put our rotor on. It also has a keyed washer. Okay. I'm going to put my axle shaft and rotor nut into place. I can't tighten the rotor nut up until I get the side cover on. So reassemble it. I wonder if that, nope, that don't come off there. Let's slide our axle shaft. Let's put a little bit of lubrication on the axle shaft. Don't need a lot, just a light thin coat. Slide the axle shaft, whoops, lost my nut. Slide the axle shaft into place here. Slide all the way through. You'll see it come out under the main gear and go right into that eccentric drive. Slide it back so you can see the hole line up where the screw goes in. And put that screw into place. I want to be careful not to cross thread any of these screws. Like I said, you gotta take your time, be gentle. That is in place. When I rotate the rotor, you'll kind of see how that all works. You can watch that moving up and down, which drives that shaft. Spinning free in both directions now. It's no longer hanging up, so I think we're good. Okay, we'll put our side cover back on. It's got to slip underneath the rotor, so I'm going to lift the rotor up a little bit. Slip the side cover into place. Put our 4 screws back in. These screws were all the same size, so it does not matter which hole they go back into. Snug them up. That is a plastic cover. It is a metal. Oh, that's actually probably graphite. Not actually metal. I thought it felt like it was metal at first. My bad. Tighten these screws down. We don't need to over tighten them. Snug this one. Okay, those are all back in. Now we'll get our rotor nut back in place and snugged up. Be careful not to cross thread that. That nut and that pinion shaft are both brass, so we don't want to destroy anything. Snug this up. Don't have to be overly tight. Just want it snugged up a little. There we are. Gonna go just a little bit farther so the flat spot lines up with that lock screw that we removed earlier. So when we go to put that in, it'll work out the way it should. There we are, and that keeps that screw from backing off on its own. Okay, now we can put our, I'm going to put just a little bit of lubrication on this. That is a moving part. Put there, and I like to put a little right on the spring. That spring is also a moving part, so it can wear. And this rotor spool slides right back onto the shaft. There is that pin, and there's a groove in here, so you have to turn it just a little bit to get it to go into place. There we go. This one here, the drag is working fairly good. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about taking it apart. I will put a little lube onto it. There we go, a little bit down into there. Put our drag knob back in. Snug it up. Loosens up. Drag is working as it should. Now this was set up as a left-hand retrieve. That's the way I like to use them anyway, so that's the way I'm going to put it back on. I'm going to clean this shaft up because remember that will come out quite stiff. Penetrating oil is really good at being a cleaner. It has solvents in it. That's how it works. Clean this up, and we'll put just a slight coat of grease on that. I also like to put a drop or two oil on that pivot point there for the handle. Put just a slight coating of grease just to keep it from freezing in the reel. And that'll slide right into place. Now it's a lot better. It's a lot better than it was. Put our nut back on, our screw. Actually, this may have been set up as right hand. I didn't really pay attention, but I use them as a left hand retrieve. Cast with my right and retrieve with my left, so I set it up as a left hand. Okay, here we are. We'll wipe the excess lubrication and dirt off the case. I use a little 3-in-1 oil as a cleaner also. That works pretty good. Helps shine things up. There we are. Alright, let's give it a try. Reverse is working. The anti-reverse is now working. It's no longer hanging up, it's spinning free. This has instant anti-reverse, so as soon as you try to go back, it locks right up. Let's try the bail. Oh, the bail is still kind of stiff, so let's get a little more lubrication down on that. Use a little bit of penetrating oil this time. Work that back and forth. Let's see how it works now. It's still kind of hanging up. I may have to pull the side cover off here. Get down in here and there we are. Okay, so on this side here, we'll pop this side off. There is a spring inside this side cover on this side, so you want to be careful not to mess with that. You can take this apart. I usually leave them together if they're working fairly good. There we are. You can kind of see how that spring works down into there. And this is the bail release lever I showed you earlier. It's just you can see it from the bottom side now. Now it seems to be flipping as it should. So let's put the side covers back in place. We'll clean up the excess oil off of this in just a second here. That screws in. Get this screw cover and screw onto this one. Oops. Like I said, a lot of times if the bales are working decent and they're not froze up, I don't go too far tearing them apart. Not a lot to them. Just got to remember to be careful of the spring and nothing goes flying out at you. Probably going to have to go wash my hands up to get this thing cleaned up. My hands are dirty. I'm getting oil all over everything now, but it's still not wanting to fully release. Here we are. Loosen that up and drop a little bit of 3-in-1 down into there. Get it on that shaft of that screw. If this doesn't free up, I will tear the bale apart and get it working properly. I've almost had the thing all apart as it is, so it's not like it would be that much more. This one does have a roller here, so I do want to put a little lubrication on that roller. Make sure it's moving freely. Alright, it was actually hung up. Now it's freed up. Let's see how the bale works now. That is still just not wanting to come back. The case is rubbing on it slightly right there. That may make the difference. There we are. Now I see what the issue was. This plastic case was rubbing against it right there. When I snugged it down, it was not fully in place. Let's see, that should make the difference. Let's see how it works now. Still not. That looks good. That side's fine. Work it a little bit here and give it a little bit more oil. Some reason it's just a little bit sticky right there. I don't quite understand why. Is it the anti-reverse is actually not tripping it. It should be tripping it. Let's pull this side cover off and take a look. Watch it in action here. Okay. Now that should push it over. Kind of hard to get it where we can watch it, but yeah. There's something not quite there. The anti-reverse lever is moving, but it's just not moving this. Why is that? Okay, what the issue is with this reel is this is the bail trip arm here. This is broken. It fits down inside the cover here. When it comes around, it pushes up on it and trips it. And this is the spring for the spring-loaded part of it. That's why this is not working properly. I'm trying to locate that part. This piece was bent. I tried to straighten it. That's how it got broke. I figured that would happen. I shouldn't have tried to straighten it, but it was useless the way it was. So I'm trying to locate that part. I may end up using this as a parts reel, because without that, it's useless. This bail, I mean, you could manually trip it, but there's nothing going to hold it. There's no spring pressure because the spring is laying right here. There's no way to put it back in to put pressure on the arm. So when you reel it in, this is just going to end up slowly folding back. So until I can find that, this is going to be a parts reel. I'm not really sure. I've been looking. I'm not able to find that piece. I can find a whole nother complete reel for sale for very little money, so I don't see the point in fixing, buying that to fix this one when that one is already complete and working. So like I say, I'll probably use this as a parts reel. If I come across one of these that's missing a lot of parts, or I can find that exact piece, then I may repair this one. But that's the end of this video. I appreciate you guys watching. This part of the video was shot at a later time because I was trying to find that piece to see if I could get this back working. I wasn't able to without buying a whole reel. Appreciate you guys watching. If you like this sort of thing, hit the like and subscribe button. Hit the notification button so you can see when I put out new videos. I've got quite a few more coming. Different reels. If there's a particular reel you'd like to see serviced, go ahead and put it in the comments. That's kind of the point of this channel. This is a hobby for me. I like to pick these up at garage sales and things not working, or even, in good shape. Get them cleaned up, get them working, get them serviced, and then I'll either resell them, I'll donate them, whatever. I have quite a collection of my own, so I can't keep them all. But I do put them online on eBay for sale. If you're interested in purchasing any of the reels in my videos, you can contact me on my information page is my email address. You can send me an email, and I can give you the link to purchase the reels that I do have for sale. Appreciate you guys watching. Hit the like and subscribe and the notice button. And thanks again.